Pond Boss, growing giant bass. 3, 2, 1.
Hey, Mr. Pond Boss, tell me what to do to make all my Lunker Lake dreams come true.
Hello everybody, Bob Lust, the Pond Boss, hanging out with Chico today. We're going to talk about growing giant bass. Greetings, Chico. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing good.
Tell you what, let's have a little fun. Let's talk about how to get some bass up to those giant sizes.
I'm in. I'm in.
I mean, you've caught some pretty good bass in your own right.
A couple. I wish I'd have gotten bigger, but I've caught a lot of nice bass.
Yeah, yeah. So, what's a trophy bass to you? How big is a trophy bass?
I'm going to say in the 10-pound range is that real trophy bass.
Yeah, and you know the odds of you catching a bass that big really kind of depended on where you go. And today I think your odds are higher because you know we're in Texas, and the state of Texas Parks and Wildlife Department has got a very cool program they call the Texas ShareLunker program.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So what they do is they've got certain qualifications for your fish to qualify as a ShareLunker. And one of the top end thing is if it's 13 pounds or bigger, then that's a legacy bass, and you can donate that bass to go to the Freshwater Fisheries Center over in Athens, Texas, in East Texas, and they'll breed that fish. So knowing that those genetics are superior for that female bass, they'll take the eggs, hatch those, and then take the fingerlings and go stock them in different public lakes around the state. Greetings, Bob Lusk here, editor of Pond Boss Magazine and longtime fisheries biologist. Welcome to the Pond Boss podcast series. Got some great topics lined up for you. Glad you're coming along. We are brought to you by Purina Mills, makers of Aquamax fish foods, Texas Hunter Products, makers of fantastic fish feeders and other hunting products, Easy Docks, and HuntBirdDog.com. We're glad you're here. Let's go have some fun together and get our learning curve up. You know, but now I'm in the private sector. This is my 43rd year. Can you believe that?
No.
43rd year.
You're not that old.
I know. You're not that old. Like I'm only 45. You know, on the inside looking out, but maybe on the outside looking in, maybe not. Yeah. You know, so what does it take for a bass to grow large? And one of my standard statements that you'll hear in more than one podcast is I'll say the odds of a bass getting to be double digits is greater than 1 in 25 or 30 million. And that's because that bass has got so much against it. Now, like right now, Ivie is producing a lot of double-digit bass. The reason it is it's caused by what we call the new lake syndrome. So when a lake, Ivie got really, really low. I don't remember if it went dry or not. I can remember seeing pictures of a puddle of water that might have been 15 or 20 acres that was blood red.
Yeah.
So it was pretty toxic. Mm-hmm. You know, fish could not live in that. So when that lake filled back up, it was a brand new lake. So when the Parks and Wildlife Department stocked it, they stocked it with the best genetics, the right kind of food chain. So now here we are, fast forward, whatever the time span is, 7, 8, 9 years later, and these fish now have had enough time to get big enough with minimal competition. So all these double-digit bass being caught in Ivie now had a huge advantage when they were stocked. But their babies are not going to have any advantage because that lake also has crappie. You know, it's also got catfish in it. So it's got other species of predators. So
the second generation, not necessarily?
Yeah, the second generation, the odds are stacked tremendously against those fish. Huh. And here's the way I want to explain it. Mm-hmm. To grow a giant bass, you got to have the right genetics, which is Florida genetics. Got to have Florida genetics. Then it's got to have the right amount of food to eat every day of its life. Now, a bass can skip a few days without a meal and can make that up. But if it skips a week or 10 days and doesn't get all the food that it needs, it can't make that up. So one of the things
it's not going to make that up at all.
No, that bass that had the genetic potential maybe to reach 18 pounds might grow to 8. It depends on how long it stays at 10, 11, 12, 13 inches long. So when a bass is hatched in a lake is 20 years old, then its odds of survival go way, way, way down because it's probably going to get eaten. And those that do survive may not be those that have the genetic superiority and the kind of behavior and aggressive nature for that body of water. So those fish are going to top out at 5 or 6 or 7 pounds. So here's, to kind of defend the statement I made earlier, it's those odds are so high because, first of all, let's say we've got a 13-pound ShareLunker bass that spawns in OH Ivie.
Okay.
Out of those fish, say she has 100,000 babies. 50,000 of them you throw in the trash immediately because they're males. Mm-hmm. The other 50,000, there's only going to be a percentage of those fish, maybe 20, 25, 30% of those, that will have the genetic propensity, the aggressive nature, and the opportunity in the food chain and live long enough to get to be that big if they don't get eaten.
First, yeah.
So if you've got 100,000 baby bass and you've got enough mouths out there feeding on those little bitty bass like that, their survival rates drop. And since there's only a 10 or 15% of the entire spawn that has all the good traits that a bass needs, if that 15% survives, which isn't likely, those are the ones that are going to have the best shot at getting to be double digits. So what does it take to grow really big bass? First of all, you got to have some luck. Mm-hmm. The best of the best don't get eaten when they're tiny little babies, and that they can strive to make it through to adulthood, which means they're not even going to hit double digits until, even in the best managed circumstances, year 6 at the earliest.
Wow.
Most of them don't hit double digits until like year 7, 8, 9. And that year 10 is more normal for a bass.
What's a typical lifespan?
Typical lifespan of a Florida strain largemouth bass is 12 to 15 years. Now, some of that's climate related.
Okay.
They can't stand cold water, so they're not going to do quite as well in northern tier states. As a matter of fact, it's illegal to stock Florida bass in some of the states in the United States because they're considered an exotic gene pool. Mm-hmm. And they don't want to bring those. Just like
a non-native species.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like the state of Florida doesn't want northern strain bass stocked in the state of Florida. Mm-hmm. So, they're trying to keep their genetic strains pure. Mm-hmm. But to be able to grow giant bass, what it takes is the right genetics. It takes the food chain. You got to get that bass up to 17 and a half, 18 inches long as fast as you can. Because for every day that it stays small, that's a day lost for growth that doesn't show itself until the end of that bass's life. So culling is real important to grow giant bass. Culling is a big deal. You got to have the right food chain. It takes 10 pounds of bait fish for a bass to gain 1 pound. And the bigger the fish gets, the more bait fish it takes to make it gain the next pound. So by the time a bass hits maybe 9, 10, 11, 12 pounds in that size class, it's eating as much as 20 pounds of bait fish to get that gain and maintain its weight. Because it takes a lot to maintain their weight. They got to have a lot of nutrition. That's why big bass have and prefer big meals. An 8-pound bass would much, much, much rather eat a 1.5-pound bass than go try to chase a bunch of little 3-inch bluegills.
Just because efficiency of movement more than anything?
Yes. It's energy conversion. Okay.
It takes that much to keep hunting.
Yeah. The juice isn't worth the squeeze. Huh? They have to eat so many little bitty bluegill to make up for the energy that they expend chasing those little bitty bluegill. So as a fisheries manager, part of our jobs is to make sure that those bigger bass have bigger meals. Okay,
a double-digit bass, when you talk about it's desired, what it's looking for, mm-hmm. What size of fish is it going to consume?
Well, like a 13-pound bass can eat a 2.5-pound bass, or it can eat a 2-pound gizzard shad. So all these, we're as fisheries managers, we're juggling all these things. Yeah. We're trying to make sure that those bass have the right sizes of the right species of bait fish at the right times in their lives. And when you start thinking about it from, peel the onion back another layer, all the bait fish are going to be spawning in the spring. The gizzard shad, if you have those, and every trophy bass lake I manage has got gizzard shad, with just a few exceptions. However, don't run out and stock gizzard shad unless you talk to a fisheries pro.
Yeah.
Because there's some downsides to that as well. But, in order to get a bass up to 10 inches, it's going to feed primarily on starting off in a newly stocked lake with fathead minnows, then maybe small bluegills, maybe red ear, that sort of thing. So that's the food chain to get the fish up to 14 or 15 inches. Then the food chain begins to shift, and to get them to 17 and a half inches, you got to have 3 to 5 inch bluegills and threadfin shad. In southern lakes, threadfin shad are a
So
great
now you're talking
choice.
about diversity in that food chain.
Food chain diversity is a big deal because the food chain ebbs and flows because they're not all spawning at the same time. So the food chain goes like this. Their spawn, there's a lot, then they get eaten by the predator fish. Then the food chain plummets until the next spawn. Then the next spawn, then it rises, and hopefully coming into the fall, we get through a hot summer, feeding slows down in the summertime. Then when we get into the fall, hopefully we've managed our lake to the point where we've got abundant food chain, abundant bait fish, all the forage that a bass can eat. And then as the water temperature begins to drop in the fall, they go in a feeding frenzy because it's nature's way of coaching those fish and coaxing those fish to gain weight and get into the best shape going into the winter so they can get through the stress of wintertime. And at the same time, the females are developing eggs, and getting ready for the spawn that's going to be coming up in the spring. So to kind of put some order into this discussion,
right.
If you're going to go try to raise some really big bass, job one is happy water. You got to understand some things about water chemistry and water quality. If the pH of your water is going up and down on a daily basis because of a plankton bloom or photosynthesis from plants because the alkalinity is low, then you need to be looking at your water chemistry. Alkalinity is a big deal. pH is a measurement. So those are the two little tidbits that I'm going to give you today. Now, you can get more in depth with this in the Institute of Higher Pondology, and you find that at pondboss.teachable.com or go to pondboss.com and find out some more. So right here, we're going to give a little primer, to talk about growing giant bass, just to kind of whet everybody's appetite. So you got to have happy water. That's what I call it. If the water is consistent and it's not the stressor, aeration may be a good idea for you. Making sure your alkalinity is good and your water quality. Those are some things that are pretty important. So you got to have happy water because it's the medium. Then you got to have the right kind of habitat to suit the different size classes of all the different species of fish that you're growing in that lake. So if you've got that, and then you got the right food chain, then your odds of growing giant fish go way, way, way up. Genetics are a big deal. But at some point, you got to look at this kind of like a garden. You're going to need a harvest plan. You're going to want to selectively harvest the bass. And in every case, by the end of year 3, because by that time, your originally stocked fish have grown up and they're reproducing, and their babies are beginning to fit into the food chain and annihilate it. Okay, so harvest is a big deal to grow some giant bass. And the thing about what it takes to get a fish big is some of that depends on that individual fish. If that fish is aggressive, which is an inherited trait, by the way.
That's genetic.
That's genetic.
Okay.
But you can't stock for that. Okay, so let's say we stock 1,000 bass in a lake. 500 are boys, 500 are girls. Those 500 boys, they may be the most aggressive ones out there, but they're not going to get very big. However, if you catch a male bass, and if you're really into this, you're going to get to the point where you can tell the males and the females during spawning season anyway. But if you catch an aggressive male and it's chunky, then you can throw that one back. But if you catch some that are long and lean and obviously underweight, here's something else. There's length weight charts that you can get online. You can find them at one at pondboss.com. If you can't find one, email me at info@pondboss.com, and I'll send you a spreadsheet and a graph that'll tell you, and a chart that'll tell you what a bass of a given length should weigh. For example, a 10-inch bass should weigh 10 ounces. A 12-inch bass should weigh about 12 ounces. 14-inch bass, about 1.5 pounds, 7 ounces, something like that. 16 inches, 2 1/4. 18 inches, 3 1/4. If your bass weighs significantly less than that, they lost weight. Mm-hmm. And that's real important to know. They don't get to be 16 inches and not weigh 2 1/4 pounds. But if they're 16 inches and weigh 1.75 pounds, that fish has lost weight.
And this crossover chart is looking at not perfection, but average?
Yes.
Okay.
So what these length weight charts show you is what a standard weight for a given length should be. Now, here's what standard means.
Okay.
Standard means what 300,000 bass weighed and measured averaged. Okay, so that's the average weight. If you catch a female bass in the springtime, she's going to be overweight. But if you catch her at the end of the spawn, post-spawn, she's going to be underweight. So normal is within about 5% of that standard weight. Which that sounds complicated until you start thinking about it. But a 10-inch bass should weigh 10 ounces, but if it weighs 12, it's probably a female getting ready to spawn. And if it weighs 8, it might be a male that just got through spawning.
And in our double checks of the chart, it rings pretty true.
It rings
It really
real true.
does. Within a 1/4 inch, like you said,
Yep.
plus or minus 5% with a 10% window, it really is right about in there.
That's right. That's right. Mm-hmm. The other thing, to grow giant bass, you got to have time. That fish has got to live long enough, have the food that it needs every single day, not miss a meal. And if you truly want to grow some, it's not unusual to grow a 10-pound bass or 11-pound bass or even a 12.5-pound bass. But very rarely do we see bass that make 15, 16 pounds. That's not normal. So you got to have happy water, the right kind of habitat, great food chain over a long period of time. You got to be doing some culling, make sure your genetics are right, and the odds go up that you can grow some really big bass. So there's some tips for you. And if you want more, then go to pondboss.com and check out the Institute of Higher Pondology. So Chico, here we go, man. Let's go see if we can help grow some giant bass. We got some tidbits out there, but for more information, you can check out pondboss.teachable.com. Now that is for folks that are getting ready to spend some money. Frankly, somebody that's going to build a lake or really wants to take the next step, to grow some really big fish. You're going to pay for the Institute of Higher Pondology, but it's going to save you money. And my good friend Freeman Sawyer coined a term that I'd never heard, and I love it. You're going to save you some dumb tax. So listen, thanks for hanging out and listening to this podcast and watching it with us. For more information, just send me an email at info@pondboss.com or go to pondboss.com. Adios. Wow, that was pretty fun, huh? I'm so glad that you joined us. Say, if you're looking for more information, I want you to head over to pondboss.com. We've got all kinds of cool information and been there forever. It's got some of the best articles, topics, got Ask the Boss discussion forum. And be sure to check out the Institute of Higher Pondology online as well. And subscribe to Pond Boss Magazine. That's what fuels the economy of what we're doing to help us put these shows on. So until next time, we'll see you then.
Hey, Mr. Pond Boss, tell me what to do to make all my Lunker Lake dreams come true.